James Swan here. This will be video blog entry number 3. Today I'd like to talk about conversion stories. Maybe some of you remember the old radio program that used to be on in the 70s and 80s, it might even still be on, called Unshackled, which documented the dramatic conversions of people to the Christian faith. It was set up like an old-time radio show with sound effects, dramatic organ music, and indeed some people have had dramatic conversions to the faith, and the show is quite fascinating to listen to, especially if you're younger. But some Christians have gone a little further with telling the conversion story, and they actually think it should be part of, say, a Christian worship service. I had a dialogue recently with a woman at my church who felt that conversion stories actually needed to be part of the worship service. I strongly disagreed, and I told her that God really didn't need our stories to help him with his gospel and his church service. If anything, we have inscripturated stories from the scriptures, like the conversion of the Apostle Paul. These are completely trustworthy. We know how Paul's life turned out, and it's Scripture, and Scripture feeds our souls. As to dramatic conversion stories, whether somebody's dramatic story is better than another person's, dead in sin is dead in sin. It doesn't really mean too much to me if somebody says that they're more dead in sin than somebody else. It's all the same. So whether you lived a terrible life of sin and converted to Christ, or a life not so bad, you were both dead sinners. You were both dead sinners. One conversion isn't more dramatic than the others. Of course, the big problem with conversion stories and say using them as an apologetic tool is you never know where the story is going to end up. The person you let loose in your church may eventually, and they tell their story, may eventually leave the Christian faith, say a month from then, or a couple months from then, or a couple years from the time they told their story. Consider Bob Dylan's album Slow Train Comin' that came out in, I think, 79 or 1980, or 78, one of those years. Dylan had this conversion to the Christian faith, and the Christians at the time were very ecstatic that Dylan had become a Christian. Yet where is Bob Dylan now? Does his life proclaim the gospel? Does he show a transformed heart? Then there's people like Eldridge Cleaver, the former Black Panther. While he was in prison, Eldridge converted to the Christian faith. I believe there was a book called Soul on Ice that documented it. Once he got out of prison, he became a Mooney. Then I believe he became a Mormon. Then I believe he didn't go anywhere for a while. Then he converted to become a staunch Republican. And then last I heard, before he died, he was addicted to crack cocaine. So his life, likewise, did not show the fruit of conversion. I don't know where Eldridge wound up or the state of his soul, but his life did not demonstrate a converted heart. And of course there's people like Frankie Schaeffer, the son of the late Reformed theologian, apologist Francis Schaeffer, who early on in his career stood with his father against abortion and now is pro-abortion. Frankie was also a Reformed evangelical. Now he's neither Reformed nor an evangelical. Last I heard, he was a member of the Orthodox Church. So you have to be careful with stories because you don't know how they're going to end up. Well, in my thinking, the sign of really weak argumentation is when particular groups or particular people use the conversion story as an apologetic tool. That is, they'll use a conversion story, say, as a proof that a particular religious point of view is true. Of course, Roman Catholicism is zealous to tell conversion stories. They write books on it. They have their conversion tapes. They'll have entire seminars based on conversion stories. Yet you don't hear too much when those conversion stories backfire and say those people leave Roman Catholicism. For instance, a couple months ago, Chris Arnzen's Iron Sharpens Iron show had a man on who, see if I can get the order right, he was a Baptist, or no, he was a Jehovah's Witness, then a Baptist, then he became a Roman Catholic, then he converted to the Orthodox Church, then he left the Orthodox Church and became some sort of Baptist, maybe even a Reformed Baptist. And Chris had him on, and Chris seemed a little hesitant during the interview, even as he was talking with this gentleman. And then we found out a couple months later after the interview that he had converted back to the Orthodox Church. So everyone that used this person's particular story as proof that their particular worldview was correct got burned by the fact that he actually left each of those movements. Well, today, which prompted this video blog entry, Roman Catholic blogger David Waltz actually posted an announcement that he has left the Roman Catholic Church. This actually shocked me a little bit. I don't read David's blog very often. I look at it occasionally, and he leaves comments on my blog occasionally. But I didn't see any evidence that David was struggling with his Roman Catholicism. If anything, he always seemed very zealous to defend it, even up until a month or two ago when I posted a response to one of his entries on Martin Luther. He seemed very zealous to defend the Roman Catholic Church. So I was really shocked to read this announcement today that David was considering or is leaving the Roman Catholic Church. He says, what I found interesting, he says that people like, say, Dr. White had nothing to do with his deconversion from Roman Catholicism. And this is how he begins his blog article. As of 2010, after months of in-depth research and sincere prayer, I will no longer be attending worship services in any church with official ties to the Bishop of Rome. Needless to say, this is anything but an easy decision for me to make. However, I have reached the point wherein I cannot longer reconcile certain historic data with a couple of non-negotiable elements in the official teachings of the Roman Catholic Church. Well, David, this is exactly what we've been saying all along, the awful anti-Catholics that we are. We've been saying that history does not support Roman Catholicism, and frankly, I'm glad that you've finally seen this. This isn't anything that we've hidden. This isn't anything that we've been mean and nasty about. It's just simply historical truth that if you try to match up the claims of Roman Catholicism, you will not be able to match them up to the historical record. David went on to criticize, quote, anti-Catholic apologists for hindering his studies, whatever that means, because he linked over to a post that is supposed to have explained why he's leaving the Roman Catholic Church, and there's 14 comments on it, and none of them were really vehemently anti-Catholic. If anything, they were very cordial and polite, and some of the participants on those 14 comments were actually Roman Catholics, if I recall. So we'll have to let David explain exactly why he's left the Roman Catholic Church. I do have one thing to say, though, in terms of these stories. Deconversion stories are similarly just as dangerous to use as conversion stories, because a person that is converting and then deconverting and then looking for something else isn't stable, is not a stable person. And the last thing they need to do is announce that they're unstable. They should just back off a little bit and actually do their research and do their work and then talk about it, maybe years later. In fact, I know of one particular person that's left the Roman Catholic Church who seems to be doing just that. I don't see him parading the fact around that he's left Rome, trying to make a name for himself based on his deconversion story. I hold no animosity towards David Waltz. He's still welcome to visit my blog when he wants to. I found this little deconversion story interesting in the same way I find conversion stories interesting. Yet we have to be really careful. They aren't proof that Roman Catholicism is either true or false. They're just that. They're just subjective experiences.